All right, I am live. We are live, and it's Crowd Chat with Cassie Elle, actually on a Tuesday instead of on a Monday because life and scheduling and things. But that's fine. Life happens, and here we are. Today I have Mike Mihealsick. Did I pronounce it? Okay.
That's right.
I was
Mhm.
asking beforehand someone if I was pronouncing it right, and they're like, it doesn't matter. Just say it how you want. So.
Right.
But I have Mike on the show today. Mike is a game designer and developer, and I actually have you on the show for a couple of reasons, mostly for the design part, but also because you have a organization that helps designers with development and bringing their games through the process of getting them to where they need to be. And so I had a couple of questions that I wanted to ask you about just what you do in the industry. The first thing though, blah, 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 talking too fast, is that so what is your, give like a brief elevator spiel about your game design history, and just for anybody that's watching that doesn't know the work you've done before.
Sure, yeah. I have been designing games since I was late third trimester in utero. Um, I've only recently gotten acceptably good at it.
Fair.
My first real thing that I started working on game design probably like back in 2010 or so, and I spent a very long time being a very bad game designer, which I think everybody should. You learn a lot of lessons that way. And then after that, I kind of started getting into more design, more development. I found a group that was local that I started kind of having a nice set of sparring partners. So we started getting better. I found that I really liked playtesting, developing, and kind of giving feedback and that sort of thing. So I founded Coalition Game Studios, did a ton of free work. Since then, we've served I think 167 clients. I think that's right. And that was since 2015 when we first opened. I have 7 games coming out. A couple of them have already been on Kickstarter, or they're already on shelves. Some that are coming out in the next few years. The ones you may have heard of were Manchukuo, which funded on Kickstarter back in September, and Flotilla is hitting shelves this December through WizKid Games. I've also got Trial of the Temples is through Emperor S4 Games, and I believe that one's out for retail. I'm not sure in North America yet if that one's getting licensed for here, but and then a few more coming out over the next several months, so we'll see.
That's great. So that's pretty cool. You've got a pretty extensive background. I'm sorry, you said 2000. When did you say you started getting into the development with like the group that you have, your local group?
The group that was also around
Okay.
2015 as well. This is around 20. Yeah, it was
Okay.
2015.
Cool.
So
So you've got a good handful of years in the
yeah.
industry, and you've got a bunch of designs that are coming out, and some that are already out. And I wanted to ask. One of the things that has been so important that I've interacted with other designers and learned about is target markets. And so I was curious to know how you take your steps into figuring out what your target market is when you're designing a game.
That's tricky. That's really tough because like really understanding target marketing is like that's a really granular like a skill set. To really have that kind of insight and understanding of what target markets are, of how to satisfy them, and how to kind of diversify or whatever. That's a pretty high level skill that I'm not sure that I have. But for me, like the main thing is like it's really trying to play as many games as I can, and then also kind of diversify my game groups and really help understand where people are coming from after plays. Like the way I think about it, it's almost like if I watch a movie, or if I go see a film or whatever, then hey, you have that tendency to want to talk about it afterwards and really just unpack your feelings and kind of be a part of other people unpacking their feelings as well. I like to do that after games as well, and try to really diversify my understanding of why different people like games, understand why people like I frequently ask my friends or my family or whatever what their favorite games are, what their the things that they're excited about are, what satisfies them in gameplay. So really understanding those different people and understanding, just having the hopefully the emotional intelligence to really help unpack those things, that can help out a lot. And then just kind of making inferences just based on intuitive thoughts, um, based on that. So
So would you say the game, like the target market of a game, kind of starts to present itself to you instead of you designing for a target? Do you find games will present to you what their target is?
I think so, yeah. Like when I think about making a game for a certain specific target audience, I'll often kind of condense that into, hey, what would Bob like, or what would Joe like, and I'll kind of use them as exemplars of what I would see being part of that. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily correct. Again, I have no marketing background, but usually when I think about player experiences in games, I'll try and break it down on an individual level, and having a really diverse set of player groups really helps with that.
That's great. I haven't really considered before how having a diverse play group can give you just like the feedback you need to know how you, I guess, like how they're finding the game to be enjoyable. Different people will find different things enjoyable. And so if you're getting similar feedback from different people and they're all enjoying certain things, then I guess the game's showing you what's the fun in it. Let's see.
Right.
So when you're designing a game and you're designing it for what Joe might like, I'm guessing you're also designing though for publishers because you want to get your game signed to publishers. How do you figure out how to design for both Joe on the street that's going to play the game and also so that a publisher will see this and say, yeah, this is a kind of game that a person like Joe would get? Like how do you find that balance of you're making something for somebody to have fun and also someone to sign?
Right. My answer is that I probably don't, and I should. uh, no, like I'm in a really fortunate position where design isn't something that I really rely on for for my well-being or anything like that. I also don't really need as much validation anymore as a published designer. I don't really need to. I don't have that hunger. I don't have that thirst for. I really got to get this game on a shelf. I need that validation from a publisher. I need to sign a contract. I find myself in the last year or two, I just kind of design games that I like, and I'll try and once I design that game that I know I love, I'll try and find a home for it afterwards. And that I'll just kind of tend to refine my target publishers based on how the game turned out rather than like start designing with the publishers in mind. You shouldn't do that if you're unpublished. That's a bad idea. But and then like as far as like comparing how to design for a publisher and how to design for Joe, it's usually I play games with Joe because I like Joe and I like the same things that Joe does for the most part. So we have that little common area where I can enjoy that as well. So yeah, I think that's about where I'm at.
So I find that interesting then that you design the games and then do you have to do a lot of tweaking for publishers when you're considering the ones that you think will appreciate your game, or do you wait for them to give you the feedback to let you know what needs tweaking?
Sometimes, yeah. So, like, an example of this is I have a pretty heavy worker placement game that I'm trying to find a home for. Anybody out there that wants one, please call me. Uh, and I actually ended up pitching to Pandasaurus because I felt like the theme and the narrative were kind of a good fit for their Wasteland Express line. Um, the game itself, though, I felt was probably a little bit too heavy for Pandasaurus. So I kind of made sure to say, like, hey, this is the game as I like it. This is the game as this is the version of the game that I like the best. But if we were to move forward with this project, these are the things that I would see us changing. I would concede that like this is probably wrong, and here's how I might fix that. Again, though, that it's really tricky to do that as an unpublished designer because they might not know that that you can execute on those changes that you're promising. So it might be a little bit different. I might have different. If I were unpublished, I would make sure I had different kits. So I'd say like, hey, this is the version that I'm going to pitch to this group. I'll play test that a little bit and that sort of thing. So just anything that you can do to make sure that you really, if you can demonstrate to a publisher that you share their vision and that you understand it, then I think that's a good thing.
What is a way that designer can show? I know you're not in a publisher seat necessarily, but when you're helping your clients with Coalition Game Studios, do you help them by getting their game to a place that they would get it signed? And how do you kind of like guide them to that? Do they tell you ahead of time what they're looking for, or do you work with them?
Sure. So the with Coalition, a lot of our clients are unpublished designers. Like that's a vast majority of them. We do work for publishers as well, for just developing and doing contract development. But as far as the independent designers, like they'll generally have a game that they're excited about, that they have kind of plans for, and then I'll just kind of help them make the best version of that game. And most of that is just general basic, just game theory. Here's, this is kind of how to make the game the best version of itself. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So I guess then what my question, going back to the publisher part, is because you're not a publisher, what do you do to, how does someone that is not in a seat where you're at that has published games, how do they interact with a publisher to show that they can perform what they're saying? Like you just mentioned, I'm going to play test this version of the game with this group, and then I'm going to show this version of the game to this publisher. How can someone show a publisher that the version they're, revealing is what works for them? Like, how do they get the attraction from the publisher?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Sorry, go ahead.
Right. I'm in a position where I can tell rather than show, and I think that it'll generally have a little bit more weight there. But show don't tell is a really good policy. You really only have one pitch with the publisher. You just show them that you understand where they're getting at, and you just make sure that your prototype, that your game, that your play is really on purpose, that you're looking through their catalog, you're understanding not just what their games have been in the past, but also like the spirit of who they are and where they're going. And that can really help out a lot. Just be choosy in who you pitch to, I think is a really good way to do. For those situations like what I mentioned earlier, where I'm looking to fit my existing game in with a specific IP that the company already has. Really, like for me to come up with a prototype that would fit that IP would be a lot of work, and you have to decide on your own whether that much work is worth it, because it's very, very possible, like as we all know, like most pitches are just like, thank you, have a nice day, but thanks but no thanks, right? There's a very real risk of that all that work that you did to adapt your prototype to a specific publisher, it could be lost. So I think that make your decisions based on what time you have available and what you think the smartest choice is, but I would say in general, like just kind of make the best game and find a home for it.
Okay, cool. Kind of going with a little bit, because you're talking a little bit about like how you can help with Coalition Game Studios. Who is your target market for your company?
Well, we have two markets. First one, like I said, are publishers that we can do contract development. I'm usually looking for publishers that are mid-sized, sometimes small, but usually people that don't necessarily have development teams in-house, or that are looking to outsource quality assurance. So if they say, hey, we've got this game, we've got a couple of problems with it, please take this project and work on this. Here's the milestones we're going to hit, whatever the terms of the project are, we can do that. But again, most of our clients are actually independent designers. So really the product that Coalition sells is that you can send us a game, and whether you've play tested or whether you have specific goals, we can help you meet those goals. And along the way, we can also give you kind of high level insights and feedback from a dedicated group of people that are saying, like, we want to understand your game. We want to talk to you intelligently about it, and we want to help offer certain sets of critique to it. And that's something that's really valuable to a lot of people. So
I agree. There are definitely a lot of companies and just individuals that can benefit from something like that. Can you help them get their game into, or at least, are you able to coach them into how they can get into that designer space that you're in, where you have people that are interested and have, I guess I'm trying to say, how can someone get into the position that you're in, where when they approach a publisher, their word has weight, like how you said earlier. You're able to say, I'm going to be able to change the game to this way, and someone will listen. How can someone get into that position?
That's a tough question. So I think, like, as far as what Coalition does, the main thing that Coalition can do in that situation is just help them make better games. If you pitch publishers good games consistently, even if they're not right for them, you can build a relationship with that publisher. That's not a whole lot along the way. It's just make sure your games are good. But the the other step there is that like I'm glad to help advise any of our clients. I'm always glad to share stories or share insights, advice, whatever to that, because it can be really difficult to break in, to get a foot in the door, right? The way that I did it myself was just over a course of years. I just made a series of pitches. I just introduced myself to people who are smarter and more interesting than I am, and eventually, hopefully, I rose to the level of the room. But it's like a big part of that is just showing up, being present, going to events, going to conventions. There were a lot of times where like I would do free work for certain publishers, which don't ever do that. I'm told that's terrible. When I was first starting Coalition, just to kind of get a little bit of pedigree under my belt, so I could so I would feel like I had the right to charge people money for what I was doing. Because before that, I wasn't really anybody before that. But like doing that, and also like finding publishers at events that are trying to playtest their own games, and kind of seeing if you can finagle your way into those sessions, so you can just be available, be of service, give your insights on their playtesting sessions, and kind of give good feedback. And the better feedback you give, the smarter you are in those situations, the more you demonstrate that you're somebody that's worth working with. And they might say, hey, let's take a pitch from that guy. So
I really like what you just said about trying to get into their playtesting groups and help give them the feedback, because it's kind of bringing back to some things that I've heard over the years about those who give are the ones who get. And so if you're willing to give a lot to, I know you said don't do it for free, but if you can, find something that is, a strength of yours that you can offer people, I think that, that's definitely a great way to get your name known. I haven't heard of anybody before really mentioning about the whole, giving and getting part. So that's a great thing to bring up.
Sure.
I'm trying to see if I had any other questions, because I think we went through them pretty quickly. When I'm trying to think of how to word my question. I guess when you're interacting with new designers and they want to say, what do I do? How do I start? What is like the best, or I guess the most common pieces of advice that you find yourself giving people to start with? Because you're not really in that place anymore where you need to be at the beginning stage. But for anyone that's paying attention and, is trying to get to that stage, where, I know this is a really long question. I'm sorry. How do you guide them? Do you ask them first where they're at and then steer them from there?
Sure, yeah. I think like many of my clients are, in fact, all of them are people that have a game together already. And I think before that, even the biggest thing that prevents people from making games is that they just haven't made a game yet.
Oh no, we froze. Oops, I think something happened. Can you hear me?
Are we still alive?
I think we are. Hold on, let me make sure that everybody can see us. I think we're live. Sorry, everybody. Yeah, froze. We're connected through Skype, so Skype did a thing. But anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead and
I'll jump back to the beginning of the question there.
Yeah, that's fine.
The question was just what are the most common pieces of advice that I generally give to Coalition clients. I was saying that the Coalition clients are generally people that have games already, and getting to that point is really the biggest thing. I know a lot of people that like have concepts, or they say, oh, I'm having trouble with this. The most important thing is just to get your first bad game on the table, and just to start somewhere. It doesn't have to be good. In fact, it will very likely be bad. But just get somewhere where you can start to grow from there, and that's the first step. So, but then once they get to the point where they're ready for Coalition, or just ready to get games on the table and playtest, whatever. The most common things that I tell people are to, one of the more common things is really just make sure that make sure your game is accessible to its audience. So whoever your audience is, whoever you decided that it is, whoever you're making the game for, make sure that those people can access it. And that's one of the the most common, I think, mistakes of a new designer is that they want to be clever more than they want to make a good product. And that's both feel good. I mean, I like to make games because I like to feel clever too. But like really it's important that the more that you add into your game, you have to make sure that like to streamline that into the best possible form of it and the latest weight form of it, so that it can be accessed by the people that you're trying to get it to. So
What makes something accessible versus like interesting, I guess, is
right. I think like that. That's a tough question. That's a lot of content there. But like, if I'm looking to design as a designer, I might try and get clever things to a game that are interesting, that I like, that make me feel excited about that experience. The problem is that experience might get lost along the way between you and the consumer, because if the journey to get to that experience is too daunting, if there are too many obstacles, or there are too many things obstructing that experience, then they won't be able to access those same feel-good moments as you would as someone who is intimately familiar with the design. The things that can kind of obstruct that are a lot of rules weight. That's the main thing, right? But it's also things like processing space. It's also things like predictability of possible outcomes. It's also just there's a lot of different things there. If I have to do too much math, then I might not do it. If I have to think in a certain way, then I might not be able to access the things that make me feel good in the game. So
that's interesting. I never really heard how something is accessible or non-accessible, and that can deter. I mean, I've heard of accessibility, but I appreciate you breaking it down because I wasn't quite sure. But that's interesting. So you tell people make sure that they have something accessible. And what else would you suggest to anybody that's watching this that is trying to get going besides get the game to the table? Is there anything that I haven't asked that you think is something that they should know about? And
nope, you asked everything. 100%. No, I mean, just generally just work on your craft. Always be playtest. You're going to get out of it whatever you can put into it, right? So, one of the bigger things is show up at the events where the publishers, at places where you can kind of get in touch with these people. Again, just show your face and build relationships. That's one of the biggest things.
That's kind of actually the main takeaway that I got from our interaction is the relationships seem to be having the relationships from the beginning from a group that you can work with, and having a diverse group to work with seems very helpful. And also just being willing to help others, because then they in turn want to help you. Seems to be kind of like where everything kind of, wraps into.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really great things about the game industry is that it's it might be different for me because I'm a white male, but like I've never felt anything but welcome in the game industry. Like it seems like many people are then they're not only brilliant and motivated, but they're also very willing to share that with you and kind of try and promote you as much as they are to promote themselves. And that's been fantastic. I always try to
Oh no, my Skype froze again.
I think I might have locked up.
Yeah, it froze again. Let me go back. Ah.
Oh.
Hi, can you hear me?
I'm here now.
Okay, there we go. Sorry.
Yep. Cool.
All right, so Skype keeps freezing up on me. Anyway, so see, it keeps doing the thing. I'm sorry. Sorry, everybody that's watching. I don't know if you can see where you're at, but there's a menu see, the window keeps changing. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and just lock this where it's at. Hopefully, whatever I'm touching. This is the thing about live streaming. Anyway, Mike, thank you for being on the show. I appreciate you coming and talking to everybody about a little bit about what you do and Coalition Game Studios. And like I said, I think my takeaway is to give so you can get and develop those relationships early. You've mentioned attending where the attending events where the publishers are. And I don't think a lot of people do that. I think a lot of people go to where the playtesting is and where a lot of the fellow designers are. But I don't think a lot of designers go to where the publishers are and offer to give them the feedback that they need. So that was a big takeaway for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And anybody, if you have any questions, before I let everybody go, I wanted to show real quick. This is the Coalition Games Studio website. If you wanted to find out more about his company, there's a frequently asked questions down here at the bottom. You can fill out an estimate form to get some more information. And then if anybody has questions just for you about game design or about your business, what's the best way they can reach you?
Best way would be either there's a website on Coalition, just info@coalitiongames.com. You can also just find me on Facebook. I'm the only Mike Mihealsick in the entire galaxy.
Are you really?
I think so. As far as I know, if there's another, I'm gonna have to take him out.
I didn't hear it. Wasn't me.
Right.
All right. I really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you for coming on a Tuesday night. I know that the Monday thing didn't work well for everybody, so I appreciate you making time for me. And anybody that has any questions, you know how to reach out to Mike. And I will be back next Monday on Crowd Chat. Mike, thank you for being on the show. Everybody, thanks for watching. This is Crowd Chat with Cassie Elle. Good night.